In the 2 short years since he was appointed by President Obama as Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan has accomplished an amazing amount of things on behalf of our nation's children, exhibiting great leadership, powered by fierce urgency, and dedicated to unparalleled levels of partnership between the federal government, states and districts, and philanthropy, among many other partners. He is transforming our nation's education systems. Prior to his appointment as Secretary of Education, Duncan served as the Chief Executive Officer of Chicago Public Schools, where he was the nation's longest-serving big city education superintendent. During his tenure there, he put in place a far-reaching set of reforms, many of which are closely aligned with some of the conversations that we've been lifting up as the most effective practices towards third-grade reading effectiveness. And he achieved unheralded gains in the student achievement, particularly for elementary schools. With that, I would like to introduce to all of you someone who is an inspiration, a leader, and a thoughtful and committed partner on behalf of our nation's children, Secretary Arne Duncan.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I apologize for being a few minutes late, and I know this is like the last event before you go home, so I'll be brief, and I'd love to have a couple good questions afterwards and have a bit of a dialogue. First, if we could please give a huge round of applause to Ralph for all of his leadership and hard work. My simple message is I couldn't be more excited about this group coming together. I think the alignment in priorities and strategies with where we're trying to go is extraordinarily tight. And as you guys, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, we don't need another study to tell us how important it is to get our babies off to a good start. We know that. We simply haven't done that work effectively enough. We haven't done it in a strategic manner. We haven't done it in a coordinated way. And this group coming together to lead this effort, I think has huge implications for the country. So Ralph, I thank you for your leadership. If we look at any of the international benchmarks, we know how we are simply being out-educated today. Lots of different measures, whether it's a 25% dropout rate, whether it's going from first in the world to 9th in college graduates, whether it's our 15-year-olds being about a year behind their counterparts in other places. And I keep saying we have to somehow get out of the catch-up business. Our universities are in the catch-up business, our high schools are in the catch-up business, our middle schools. And if we ultimately want to get out of the remediation business, we have to get our babies off to a good start. And I always wonder about how the best kindergarten teachers in the world, and my daughter experienced this in kindergarten in Chicago, where you have some children coming to kindergarten reading fluently, literacy skills intact, socialization skills intact, and other children who don't know the front of a book from the back of a book, who have never been read to. You have some children who may not even know their full name, they've been called a nickname all their life. And that puts the greatest kindergarten teacher in a very difficult spot. And when you have 27, 28, 30 children along that wide spectrum, that's asking an awful lot of our very best. And so if we can level the playing field, if we can have our babies enter kindergarten ready to learn and ready to read and be at grade level by 3rd grade, then we can really truly start to talk about every child going on to college or some form of higher education. We can really start to raise their aspirations. So I want to thank this group for thinking about this. I think some of the common building blocks you're working on, we know in pre-K and K who our students who are most at risk are. Look at those students that are missing 15, 20, 25, 30 days a year. And you'll tell you right there, if we don't intervene, those are our future dropouts. And people sort of forget on it, if you get a 90% on a test, you're doing pretty good. If your attendance is 90% on a 180 school year, you're missing 18 days, you're missing a month out of school. Again, what is our best teachers going to do in that situation? And so you go to any pre-K, Head Start, kindergarten class, find those students that are missing 15, 20, 25, 30 days, and what are we going to do differently for them? We don't need another study on summer reading loss. We see that all over the country, that students get to a certain point, teachers work extremely hard by June, they come back to us in the fall further behind than when they left. And we're either going to do something differently about that, or we're going to continue to function on an agrarian calendar and not too many of our children work in the fields anymore. And then the final thing I'll say is your idea of sort of taking this on at the state level. And we think there are lots of different ways to play, but doing this in coordinated fashion, state by state, looking at the children, looking at the communities most at risk, and systematically intervening very, very early. If our children are reading, if they learn to love to read early on, then they're going to do fine in all the other areas. If we don't do this one well, I think we put a huge limit, a huge ceiling on what our students can accomplish. So as we get into the Q&A, I'd love to hear what we can do to be a good partner. I want to do everything I can to support your collective efforts. This idea of public-private partnerships, particularly in tough budgetary times, are hugely important. You guys have an amazing reach around the country, and if we can find ways to drive this conversation, more importantly, not drive the conversation, but drive changes in behavior, drive different interventions, drive a systemic strategy, getting to those children and families who need the most help, then everything we're trying to do around college and career readiness, raising standards, better assessments, then that starts to be much more meaningful. If we still have children entering 4th grade, reading at the 1st grade level, reading at the 2nd grade level, again, we're never going to sort of break through and get where we need to do, where we need to go as a country. So thanks for your collective leadership. I know there may have been historical battles between 0 to 3 or school, or 0 to 3rd grade or whatever it might be. Having this group come together, focus on those early years from birth all the way through 3rd grade, and to do it systemically, to do it comprehensively, to do it in a coordinated manner. I couldn't thank you enough for that leadership. I look forward to what we can accomplish together. I'll stop there and take any questions you might have on anything. Thank you.
We actually wanted to invite the moderators from the first day to just throw out a couple of initial questions, give you a chance to hear those and respond,
Sure.
and then you can take any others that you have time for.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask in order Barbara OBrien, Marcy Young, Dan Leeds, and Dara Rose, if she's here. I can't see her, but okay, they are our first 3. Thank you.
Good morning, Secretary Duncan. Thank you. I am Barbara OBrien, the former Lieutenant Governor of Colorado. I'm currently a senior fellow at the Piton Foundation. And I wondered if there's a chance that the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services could come up with some core benchmarks along the continuum from prenatal care to 3rd grade reading proficiency that would help state efforts measure sort of in real time the progress we're making from the campaign for grade level reading.
It's a great suggestion, and we've tried to work very, very closely with HHS. Kathleen's been a great partner, as you know. I think Jacqueline Jones spoke yesterday, maybe the day before, and you know what we're trying to do with the Early Learning Challenge Fund. So we're trying to play in this space in ways we haven't before. I would say we're pushing everyone else very hard, but in many areas I think we've been part of the, many ways we've been part of the problem. I think this is one area where our department has absolutely been part of the problem. We haven't invested enough in early childhood education. We're trying to change that in a big way. I have my budget hearing after I leave here, so wish me luck with that. And it's a pretty big deal, actually. So we'll see whether we're just talking or whether we can. But if we could get $350 million to drive this, and if we do that, having real benchmarks and assessments along the way are really important. And I would say I always try to be candid. Maybe I'm too candid sometimes. It's very interesting when I go out with Jacqueline and talk about early learning with different audiences. When I talk about how important it is and we want to do more funding, everybody cheers. When I talk about sort of evaluation assessments, the room often gets pretty quiet. And I think we have to find that balance of, yes, we need to invest, but we need to know which programs are producing students that are ready to enter kindergarten, ready to learn and ready to read. And so I think assessing students and really having that a much better knowledge base about what interventions, what programs, what are we doing systemically to change outcomes. We need to frankly move that field, the early childhood field, along in that direction. And we won't do it perfectly, and we'll try some different things and learn from them. Hopefully 5 years from now we'll be better than we are today. But we need to have those conversations. We need to invest, but they have to be wise investments. Yeah.
Good morning, Secretary. My name is Marcy Young. I'm the Director of Pre-K now at the Pew Center on the States. And I know you know recently in New Jersey there was a proposal to dramatically cut back on the highly successful Abbott School District Pre-K program. And you noted this morning and you noted then so eloquently that we don't need another study that shows that Pre-K works. There's educational and economic benefits. But we also know it's not a silver bullet, right? That we've got to really build that on a foundation of early learning in the very youngest years and then align that with what happens in the early grades. So I'm just wondering what your vision is as we think about reauthorizing ESEA maybe this year, how we really help schools, how the law can help schools integrate early education as a fundamental part of their reform efforts and really make that a part of the day-to-day operations and educational activities.
So let me take that a couple of different ways. So we absolutely want to reauthorize this year. I'm actually pretty confident we can do that. And for all the craziness you guys see in Washington, it can be crazy. I really continue to think education can be the one thing folks can come together behind in a bipartisan way. And we've been working hard on this for 2 years to build the foundation. The President's providing great, great leadership. So I think we can reauthorize. We want to continue to create greater flexibility, but also let people know how flexible they currently have, how much ability they have to change resources. Title I money for early childhood education, lots of myths out there. You can't do that. We want to continue to break through those. We want to have early childhood education be really a part of reauthorization. And it's interesting, Senator Harkin, it is, by definition, the Elementary and Secondary Act. He's saying, why is that the case? Why isn't it pre-K, early childhood through whatever? So, I mean, at that level, both symbolic and in a fundamental way, rethinking the vision of where we want to go. But let me end on the first part of your question. So the NGA, National Governors Association, was here this weekend. I spent a lot of time with them, and I was just extraordinarily clear that I just simply can't support any governor who's cutting back on early childhood education. And I know this is these are extraordinarily tough budget times. We're all feeling it at the local level, at the state level. But I mean, I put in my address to them that, despite these very tough times, when, as you guys know, families, when times are tough, you prioritize and you figure out what you do with less, and you figure out how to do it strategically. And I think there are a number of other places where, given the tough budget times, we have to make tough cuts, and no one likes doing that. But those that are eliminating early childhood programs or going from full day to half day or whatever they might be doing, it seems easy to do. I think the cost of children and cost of those communities are huge. And I was very, very clear with all the governors this weekend. Whether it moves them or not, I don't know, but I hope I gave them some food for thought.
Hello, Mr. Secretary. It's great to have you here. I'm Dan Leeds. I chair the Alliance for Excellent Education and the Education Funder Strategy Group. You mentioned international benchmarks, and certainly they show the U.S. position, speaking relatively, and they also point to the importance of improving the quality overall of U.S. education early ed programs in order to get the results down the road. One of the other things all the international experts say is you can't get to an excellent system if you don't have equity. So could you address that a little bit, particularly in light of ESEA?
The other point I'll make quickly on the international benchmarks, I'm spending more and more time looking across the globe because those are where the jobs are going. Companies are going to go to where the knowledge workers are. And the idea that we're competing in the district, in the state, just isn't factual anymore. And if we don't do something radically different, jobs and companies are just going to continue to migrate to other places. If you look at the PISA results, you can actually disaggregate PISA down to the state level. We've done some work looking at if each state was a country, where would we rank? And so as a country, we're somewhere 23rd, 25th, depending on which benchmark you look at. But you get our highest performing state today, which is Massachusetts. If Massachusetts was a country, it would rank 17th. So we don't have a state in the top 10 or the top 15. That's reality. Our bottom performing state, Mississippi, is like 93rd. So again, just talking about reality of where we're at. And psychometricians will tell you this data, doing this analysis aren't perfect. I'm sure it's not perfect. But I think it provides a pretty compelling case, again, why you guys are looking at state level. But our highest performing state is not competitive educationally with countries in the top, again, 17th. So just starting there. On the equity side, we actually, this past week, as you know, Dan launched this Equity and Excellence Commission and really trying to figure out how we drive systemic change and create opportunities in underserved communities. It's an extraordinarily talented group of folks. Russell and Ali, who runs our Office of Civil Rights, is a superstar. And I'm looking forward to some very provocative and thoughtful recommendations where they can push us in our thinking of how we look at equity across within districts and across states. And I think that conversation is one we have to have. We were very careful and meant it very intentionally that this is about equity and excellence. And I think there are lots of places that have, frankly, lots of money that haven't gotten good results for children for a long time. DC being exhibit A for me. DC has not been an inadequately funded district. I would have loved to have had half the money that DC had when I ran the Chicago Public Schools, but this place was allowed to be dysfunctional for decades. Now we're seeing some pretty dramatic changes here. It's going the right way. Newark, New Jersey hasn't been underfunded, but has had horrendous results, and we have to continue to challenge the status quo. So this is about equity, it's about driving excellence, closing achievement gaps, and you're starting to see real leadership in places where we haven't seen it before. It's one, as you know, I'm acutely aware of. When I ran the Chicago Public Schools, we had less than half the money of wealthier districts 4 or 5 miles north of us along Lake Michigan. And my children, 85% of whom live below the poverty line, needed a little bit of that help that children on the North Shore were getting. And we have to be willing to look at those tough issues. We have to be willing to look at what with a property tax-based system of funding, what that means for the children in greatest need. One other thing, point not quite on top of, just to add that we're trying to think not just about obviously what's going on in classroom, but what's going on in communities. This Promised Neighborhoods initiative I think is so important. What Jeffrey Canada has done is pretty remarkable. Many of you have been involved in our Invest in Innovation Fund, and are some of our winners and folks we're looking at. But we're looking to get sort of breakthrough results. And by thinking differently, by investing in places that can really take to scale what's working, by engaging entire communities behind children, making sure they're safe to and from school, then we start to create climates in which students can be very, very successful. So we're trying to play at the state level, at the district level, at the community level. And we think by playing it, working with all those levers, it gives us a chance to go better, to get better much faster than we ever had in this country. You want to do one, two more? Or? I'll do. I'll take two more, and then I have to go one, two, and then I'll sneak out.
Linda Katz, Children's Literacy Initiative, one of the I3 validation grids. Have you ever thought of a race to the top for ed schools, that you can change how they prepare teachers to teach reading? I know, I'm Johnny One Note here. I've been talking about.
Not only have we thought about it, we hope to do that. Yes. Yeah.
See that? I almost fell flat on my face. Okay. Hello, Secretary Duncan. I'm Elizabeth Burke-Bryant. I'm Executive Director of Rhode Island Kids Count, and I am the co-chair of Rhode Island's Early Learning Council with Commissioner Gist, who I know is a good colleague of yours. We are so excited to see the moves that you are making to send strong signals from the Department of Education that learning begins at birth, learning begins prenatally, all the way through the continuum, birth to third. And I just want to reinforce what kind of activity those kind of moves generate back in the States. For example, I know when you released the original Striving Readers, to have that not be an older kids literacy program, but starting birth through 12th grade was just enormous in getting our literacy teams, state literacy teams, excited. So I just want to say that any of those kinds of things that you can do, and yesterday it did come up, I think my colleague Linda sort of hit it on the nose. Even with the Early Learning Challenge Fund, it was an idea that was raised yesterday that if there are policy moves that are incentivized by making you more competitive, it is unbelievable the way that sets off a scramble of our policymakers to really be competitive and try to win the grant. So I just want to thank you for the moves you've already made and say that any would be welcome at the state level.
Well, it's a great sort of final question or a challenge to us, and I think this is prime time. So we will know hopefully soon whether or not this funding exists, and we're going to move into figuring out what the RFP will look like. And any thoughts on this or other things, again, I can't overemphasize how excited I am about this team coming together around the country. So push us very, very hard on what that RFP would look like, what we need to encourage, what we need to incent. I think we saw some pretty extraordinary change in behavior thanks to Race to the Top. There are lots of lessons learned. We didn't do it perfectly, but overall it moved the country in some very significant ways. So whether it's Race to the Top for higher ed generally, whether it's Race to the Top for schools of ed, whether it's trying to change behavior on the early learning side, we have a unique opportunity to do that. And for better or worse, in very tough budget times, obviously when we have some additional resources, it maximizes our leverage. And in flusher times, frankly, it'd be harder to get some of these systemic changes we need. So it's this idea of turning crisis into opportunity and trying to break through. So you can email me, email Jacqueline, but if this funding is real, we're going to move pretty quickly towards putting this together. So this is absolutely real time. And any thoughts you have on how we can encourage the right behavior, incentivize the kinds of partnerships, and breaking down the silos that we need, we are absolutely open to that. And please get it to us quickly. But thanks so much for your leadership, Ralph. Again, thanks for having me.